U.S. President Donald Trump is right now meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, with trade talks expected to take center stage.
They want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit. We made a deal, and it's a great deal. And I'm into helping them. Our country is doing very well. We've never done this.
So that's the U.S. president commenting outside the White House. This is just before he left on this state visit. This is him saying whether or not he'll adjust his trade deal with the UK. Despite Trump's comments, the U.S. is reportedly walking away from plans to end steel and aluminum tariffs in the UK, raising questions over how the rest of the world could be affected. This is the handshake from earlier this morning, where the U.S. president is at Chequers, which is the country home of the UK Prime Minister. They're talking right now. And right now, we've brought in Mark Warner. He's an international trade expert and lawyer to talk a little bit more about how that deal could affect us here in Canada. Back in May, Mark, the White House pledged to, quote, negotiate a steel and aluminum tariff rate for the UK that's less than 25%. This was really lauded because it was sort of the first solid framework anybody had seen in one of these deals with U.S. President Trump. And despite that pledge, the UK is currently paying a 25% steel tariff to the U.S. But in August, Trump did exempt the UK from his doubled 50% steel tariff on the rest of the world. So what is holding up negotiations with these tariffs in the UK?
Well, I think the problem is that the UK steel industry is going through a lot of transition, and a couple of their plants have shut down. One of the major UK steel producer that sells and exports into the United States basically imports a lot of steel from basically India and Turkey through its subsidiaries. And the Americans basically want to have a rule, which is to freeze out China. And the only way they found to do that is to have rules on what they call melting and pouring steel have to be done in the country that's exporting. That's to say the UK. And so the UK has not been able to do that. Their producers simply can't agree that they can do that because, as I say, they're importing from their subsidiaries in India and Turkey, and that's the stumbling block. So I would think on this one, it's that Starmer, when he returned to Britain, wasn't able to deliver what he agreed with Trump. I don't think that Americans have changed their position.
Well, it also explained some of the pomp and ceremony that we've seen since President Trump arrived in the UK. They need him in a good mood for the talks that are happening this morning. If the president doesn't budge, where does that leave Canada's chances of getting U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs removed?
Well, I think it is a good example for Canada, because essentially what the Americans are saying now is, look, the last time we had a fight with you in Trump 1.0, we used our national security tariffs under Section 232, and then we had an agreement where essentially Canada agreed to a quota, although they didn't call it that. But they said, and you also agreed that Canada also agreed that we wouldn't. That we would take steps to make sure that we were not re-exporting imported Chinese steel or other steel into the United States. Now the Americans are saying, look, we're not only concerned with that. We get it. You satisfied that test. But we don't understand how you can sell steel into the United States below our own costs when you're importing 2/3 of your market, Canada, from steel from abroad in places like China and Turkey. So I think what we can take away from the UK is that the Americans are saying, we're deadly serious about taking China out of our supply chain, and that's going to be the condition number one for concessions on steel. That's very, very hard for Canada to do. I mean, the Carney government and the Trudeau government before have tried to increase tariffs on Chinese steel, but that really doesn't deal with the fact that the Americans are saying, hey, 2/3 of your market in Canada is imported steel.
Back in May, the White House said its deal with the UK, quote, sets the tone for other trading partners to promote reciprocal trade with the United States. That's what the White House said. The UK was the first, as we mentioned, to reach a trade agreement with the U.S. since Trump's second term began. So what improvements could Canada be pushing for when negotiating its own deal with the U.S.? And you put a really fine point on the fact that we have to expand to other markets while still appeasing the U.S. as our largest trading partner.
Yeah, I think that the reality of it is that the UK deal was a model for the subsequent deal with Europe and Japan and Korea. In Canada, so far, what we've got is this, Trump has exempted us largely to the extent that the goods that are being exported are compliant with the CUSMA or the USMCA. So that puts us in a really different position from those other countries. So all we really have to negotiate at this particular moment are these sectoral tariffs. And, you know, the aluminum one is the easier one to see some sort of tariff agreement. Steel more difficult for the reasons I just explained. We have the outstanding issue of pharmaceutical tariffs coming down that haven't been determined yet by President Trump. That potentially could be a hit on Canada or not. So, and again, what he agreed in the UK agreement was that that he wouldn't adversely affect the pharmaceuticals unduly, sort of thing. So that might be an example for Canada. I mean, Canada's slightly different because we export a lot of generics. I think he'll be looking very closely at some of how we price our our drugs in Canada, using a reference basket of goods from other countries that doesn't include the United States. So my guess is there'll be a bit of toing and froing on that. So I think ultimately we have to sort of see this as an important step that at least somebody got Trump on the way. And it's interesting is he hasn't made a big deal out of Israel. Yeah. That could have been something to hold it up. He hasn't made a big deal out of so far, at least yet today, on India in terms of these secondary sanctions. So all those things I think are good news for Canada.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back, Mark, to talk about the U.S. tech ties and what that means for Canada as we take a look at AI becoming part of these trade negotiations. Mark Warner, international trade expert and lawyer, great to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.